So, Fabrizio, you're based in London. How's looks like I see this weird glowing thing behind you. Is that sunlight?
Um, Sometimes we get that here. I think there's a lot of mirrors and windows there to amplify it, so you get this nice kind of light coming through the middle of our atrium here. So we're here at Scale
Nice.
Space, very well engineered. It's actually the sun is bright outside. You wouldn't believe. It's a little bit cold. It's getting starting to get a little bit cold. It's probably in the sort of 13, 10 degrees today. But yeah, not too
All right.
bad. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, not too shabby. I'm about 20 minutes north of Marseille in a town called Aix-en-Provence in France, and
Very
we
nice.
we generally have pretty good sunshine. It's been a little bit rainy today, but I can deal with a day or two of rainy here. Um,
I can see you wearing a t-shirt, so that's showing off a bit.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I think it's
amazing.
the half hour. Shall we kick off?
Yeah, yeah. Let's kick off. So, welcome everybody. Really great to have you here today with us. I have the pleasure of being continuing a conversation with Josh here. We had a few in the last few days, and hopefully um, keeping the best for today to share with you. I'd like to welcome everybody and encourage you to participate and ask questions. Please drop the questions in as we go through if you see there's something that you're particularly interested in, and likewise, please do connect with us and let's continue the conversation afterwards. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Hive. Hive operates under two brands: Hive Learn and Hive Perform. Hive Perform is focused on sales enablement, so this is what we're here to talk about today: how to train a sales team on solution selling. And I've got Josh here to pick his brains on the topic. So, Josh, can you do a quick intro of yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Josh Squires with Bongo Learn. I've been kind of in the kind of scale up startup space now for 25 years. Um, so it's been a minute, but started out actually in academia and had some side companies. But my passion has always been kind of taking small mid market businesses from like 1 to 10 million in growth. And that's my role at Bongo is basically how do we kind of put the rocket boosters into the ship. And so really excited to be on with you, Fabrizio, and talk more about one thing that I wish every seller could do better, which is solution selling.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love the analogy with the rockets there. Rockets are really, really, really high up there at the moment. So let's start with a question. We're going to be talking about solution selling, and there's so much to talk about it. I really love this question that Chiara sent us from our audience. She sent us in advance, which is a great way to start unpicking the topic further. So her question is about um, solution selling. What's the best way to be a solution seller when you don't have direct access to the end client? So you're selling through an agent that is representing them. So the agent will not naturally not have all the answers to your questions to help position that solution or be consultative, right? So, Josh, can we start with that and then we can unpick into the sort of nuances of solution selling?
Absolutely. It's actually a more kind of common question than you think. And if we unpack kind of what an kind of an agency model looks like, for me, it looks very similar to kind of a partnership structure. And so when you're kind of building out a partnership structure, a lot of what you need to do is enable that partner to understand the product's ins and outs and understand how to position the product in a way that they're basically selling on your behalf. Now, there's kind of good ways of doing partnerships and bad ways of doing partnerships, and good ways of selling and bad ways of selling. But ultimately, it's for me, it's how do we get that partner to basically help their end client solve a business problem using our tool. And so I've been through this number of times where they won't necessarily share any information about the end partner. That's very common if you happen to be partnered with any of the big four. They say very little.
Mm, mm,
Um, but at the same time, how do we position it where they can leverage uh, the information that we provide and the business case and unpacking kind of some of these questions that we would normally ask, get them to ask on our behalf, and we basically partner with them. to kind of
Mm.
be the intermediary. It's a little bit tricky, but the nice thing about partners is once they're enabled, they can go forth and act as an additional sales arm. But ultimately, for me, it's really kind of the goal of that partnership motion and making sure that we can enable these guys.
Yeah, that's super cool. Looking at them as a partner rather than someone you're trying to sell, who's kind of a gatekeeper, that in a way, right? And it's almost like we're talking about training your sales team on solution selling, but that also involves training your partnership teams on solution selling, and that's how you sort of I love that. Um, I think the other thing about this kind of agents, and you mentioned that, like the big consultancy firms, for example, who are going to be very protective of their clients' details, but they do have a vantage point where they're looking at lots of different clients that are in need of something that your solution might be able to solve, right? So they have a
100%.
level of view and intelligence in the market that might be helpful for you. And this me thinking as a product leader, that's the stuff that I'm interested in. I want to know what you're learning from the conversations in selling your solution, so that we can sort of continue to make the solution match that. What's different about solution selling? What's different from perhaps other more traditional sales?
Well, I mean, I kind of got into this whole concept of solution selling back when I was kind of in academia, but I was also kind of running, side projects, right? Let's say, and ultimately for me, it's all about discovering what the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And so if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I need a hammer and I got a box of nails, but I need something to put them into," all right. Well, I sell wood. That's probably pretty easy. Um, but oftentimes, people have kind of a vague frame of a problem that they don't necessarily know how to articulate. And so within a solution selling framework, it's really about trying to unpack what is that problem? Who's impacted by that problem? What happens if you don't solve this problem? What tools do you have
Mm,
in your stack that are kind of related to this problem that aren't working? Why or why not? Working or aren't working. And so it's building that overall story that a lot of times if you're kind of doing just a product sale, and a lot of new salespeople kind of do this. It's a feature list, and I've got this feature and this feature and this feature and
mm,
this feature, and a lot of buyers, especially kind of in L&D, well, a lot of new buyers, they build an RFP, and the RFP is a feature list.
right.
And it's like, all right, feature bingo. Whoever's got the most
They
features,
look
they
forward to
win.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, which in product, right? Often, I've seen junior product managers also. It's like, oh, hey, we need more features, but do we need more features? And so
Yeah. And are they going to add more confusion to everything, or start to dilute the proposition? Because I think I love something you mentioned, and we're having some discussions ahead of this call, and you're talking about what is the skill, what are the top things a new salesperson needs to know before you feel like you're confident to let them on a call with a lead. And you talk about becoming an investigative journalist. So I really like that, and I think it's kind of what you're alluding to here, right? It's like that discovery is a skill of curiosity before you start thinking about the feature list and the sale and all of that.
100%, it's unpacking the why, right? Or solving for the why. Why is this an issue? Why is there urgency now rather than next year? So what are you trying to accomplish? And so a lot of times, we see kind of key sales methodologies, spend, challenger, metapic, blah 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 blah. They ask kind of these frameworks, but we see a lot of SDRs, BDRs, AEs rush through that, say yes, they're
Mm,
qualified, give me my piece of the pie. AEs then get to these guys. Sometimes they need to unpick it a bit more. Sometimes they don't, but they kind of rush right into the value proposition of the product. Um, and so for me, that idea of the investigative journalist is, we're solving for root, right? So
mm,
oftentimes the people who are reaching out to us don't know what that is, And so that's also where part of the solution sell is this concept of multi-threading, and basically saying who else is being impacted by this challenge. Let's get them into the call. Let's get them as an ally. The person on the call is oftentimes a champion, but not necessarily the final decision maker, right? Why does the
Yeah.
decision maker care? Why? Um, and then we can basically build a partnership between ourselves and the buyer, where we're working on solving the problem together. you know Ultimately 90+% of all business deals don't happen on a sales call. They happen in a room on the client side, doing a meeting or doing a Zoom, doing a Teams, and I'm not involved. My team isn't involved. You're not involved. We don't know what's going on. So it's really helping them craft a business case, helping them put together a value proposition that all indicators lead to us. you know,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
It's you remind me of challenger sale you mentioned, right? So
yep,
challenger sales, and I wanted to ask you this: how much do you think, as a salesperson, as a a sales leader, and even as a product, as a company, how much do you think we should have an opinion on how to solve a problem, and when do we present that? Because
that's a great
that's
question.
the point about the sort of challenger, right?
Yep,
You show that sort of big problem, and you say there's only one way to solve this problem. By the way, we help you solve that problem in
right.
exactly this way. So um, I think, well, I want to hear your thoughts on, like, how much do you think we should have an opinion, and when to introduce that.
I mean, I think you need to have an opinion when you solve for root, right? So when we have a really clear alignment and triangulation on what the problem it is that they're trying to solve, and your solution has a really good ICP fit for that
Mm,
solve. I see a lot of challenger sales people who are amazing salespeople, easily kind of manipulate a sale, get the close, get the commission check, get the house, get the car. But at the end of the day, the client isn't a good fit for the
right.
organization. And so that actually impacts you and makes your life incredibly fun because
Yeah.
now we've got a pretty pissed off client who has 80% of a solution, but the 20% that they really need is, oh, I didn't unpack that. But I got the sales guy who promised the world and really kind of shook me and made me kind of jump in my seat and sign that check. And
Sold the
now you're
dream.
stuck holding the bag.
Sold the dream, and then we get the feature
100%.
requests, right? One after the other.
That's it. And I'm not saying that that's 100% a bad thing. I mean, honestly, that's often how software evolves. But I mean, it's a trap that when we're kind of looking for predictability and scalability, and kind of growth, we've got to be careful. And I fall a victim of that too. I mean, like you get into the sales motions, you get all excited. It's like, oh yeah, man, Bob can build that, no problem. Forgetting to ask you, of course. Um, So I,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, well, I'd love to hear your opinion on kind
No,
of
I
challenging.
think I agree with you. I think we need to have an opinion, and just by forcing ourselves to have an opinion as a company, not just as a sales,
Right.
not as a sales team, or not just the product team, but as a company, I think we need to have an opinion on, like, this is how I believe this problem needs to be solved, because otherwise, the alternative is not as interesting. We haven't seen the alternative work for our clients, and one of the things that I happen to work in lead sales in the past as well. And one of the things that I realized is that you get a lot of intelligence because you're talking to so many people who are sharing their problems with you, and if you're doing the job well and your team's doing the job well, you're doing so much of that kind of discovery. You know what's going on in the market, right?
Yeah,
um,
100%.
and that is valuable for the next person that you're going to talk to, and it helps you become better at positioning. So um, let's talk about, okay, how do you, so if you identify the problem, and I think there's if you've done your job well as an investigative journalist, how do you then position the product, right? You've got an opinion about solving the product, we talked about that, but how do you position the product? How do you position it to that specific problem?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's the power of the business case. And so if you've done your job well as an investigative journalist, you understand the business impacts of not solving this problem, of not having a solution that basically allows for X, Y, Z, A, B, C acceleration, money saving, time lost, time gained, whatever those kind of core business problems are. You basically work with them to actually build that kind of business charter that they can then circulate internally,
Mm,
and they're basically selling on your behalf. So Kiara's initial question of what happens about a third party agency, that's the rest of the organization. Ultimately, you're typically working with a champion, maybe a team or a committee, but that committee still is accountable to somebody. And so the best way you
mm,
can arm that committee is not a mutual action plan, not a 90-page pitch deck, not a this, or this, but a short, sweet, concise, vanilla, they brand business case
mm.
that says, hey, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Here's the impact of not solving that problem. Here's where Bongo can or Hive can jump in
Yeah, yeah,
and do it this. Here's the expected savings, earnings, up, down, sideways, crossways that this will happen. And here's the signature. you know,
yeah,
um, and then they go and pitch that, right? And if we do a good job of kind of selling the dream and making sure that we're very analytical about it, making sure that we have demonstrable evidence that our product can solve their problems, then it becomes a
yeah.
pretty easy sell. And by easy, if we're dealing with enterprise, it goes to 9 months instead of 18. Um,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I think that's a very good insight. If you approach it in the situation that Chiara mentioned, it's like even if you're talking to someone directly in the company, right? Someone reached out and came through your HubSpot or whatever. You, you put a booking, you put a first call in with them, and you're having that conversation. Just approach that as if they're not the buyer; they're kind of the
yeah,
agent, right?
that's it.
How do you build that partnership from the start, and and how can you make the best case for that person to present? I think um, even like I like how you said, in the way that they see business cases, because there's not my template for a business case that's going to cut it. Like they
Yeah,
have their own way to look at it. They have their own metrics. They have their own, um,
100%.
and there's no point in me showing all great stats from another client that have nothing to do with what they're trying to track.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, your solution needs to match their problem. And oftentimes I see new salespeople, new sales organizations, new sales leaders um, wanting to operationalize, streamline, build this flywheel of predictable revenue. And I've got a hammer, so I see a bunch of nails. And oftentimes we can kind of get there, and especially with kind of the product-led growth motion, that's probably an okay way of doing it. But in industries where we're serving a more nuanced group of clients, and maybe there's a bigger price tag on the product as well. I mean, and whether
yeah,
it's 30 grand or 50 grand, I mean, it's still a lot of money, or
yeah,
even 10 grand is a lot of money. I mean,
yeah,
it's 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 serious cash. You know, what does my spend get me towards the goals that I want? And if they're not willing to share those goals, walk away. They're not serious.
right.
Send
That's
them
yeah,
to a competitor you don't like.
yeah,
Let them burn their clock cycles on him.
yeah.
Um, but really, it's this idea of partnership, and
And
I want. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, sorry, and just because you made me think about, because we were talking about how do you train your sales team on that is I find that is one of the hardest things is to get people to let go
Yeah,
of the leads that are not serious or not mature at that point in time. And it might be like, okay, do you know what? Engage with our newsletter. Let's keep in touch, but don't put them into your pipeline for that quarter because that's
oh,
just going to create a lot of
absolutely,
you know time that's going to be wasted in that, and like that kind
hundred
of false.
percent.
How do you deal with that, Josh? Where do you think what was your top tips when you train your
Oh,
team
it's a
with
great
that?
question. I mean, it's a great question. It's like, well, look, I mean, have you built them a business case? No. Okay, they're not closing this quarter. Um, you know, have they
Right.
circulated the business case? A lot of times we talk about mapping and multi-threading and blah 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 blah, but ultimately is how has that business case been received? Do we have feedback? Are they working on it together? And there's a bunch of tools, and I'd love to do a shout out to Nate Nestrella. I mean, he's the master of building the business case, Fluent.io. Um, but it's are we are our sales teams kind of following this methodology, and they say, hey, here is a problem statement, here is a solution statement, here is how we map to both of those, and has that been circulated internally on behalf of the client? Do we get kind of feedback and
Mm,
interaction? And that then becomes a kind of predictable indicator that, if they're not working on it with you, they're looking at another solution. If they are working with it on it with
right.
you, they're like, okay, they're pretty bought in, they're pretty invested. And then you can kind of follow some of the more traditional sales cycles. Are we doing a technical review? Are we going through a procurement review? Blah 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 blah
Sort of
blah.
compliancy, etc. Yeah,
That's
which is
exactly
when
it.
they're getting serious about it, right? If it gets to that stage and
100%.
they're getting serious about it, if they get you to talk to their compliance team or their tech team, then you're like, okay, that's all
All
good
right,
signs.
we're moving, right?
Yeah.
But if they're not engaging with you, if they're not really kind of co-building the sale, because
Mm,
ultimately they have to sell their team, so we have to enable them to sell their team. And that's ultimately, like, I kind of don't even want to call it sales anymore. It's kind of influence, right? Um,
yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
here's what we do, here's how we do it. How do I work with you so you can showcase that to other people in your team so we can then work together for the next
Yeah.
X years.
And you're going to be working for a long time. That's the other thing, right? You're
Yeah,
selling a solution. It's not just one shipping that's going to be delivered from your warehouse to theirs. It's like you're going to be working together. So you got to build that relationship anyway, and you're going to have to make that relationship healthy to the success of the relationship
thousand
going forward.
percent.
Yeah.
1000%. And I think that's the end goal, right? I mean, so if you look at the virtuous cycle of kind of sales, you have a happy client who's being very successful using your product to solve problems, and then they want to talk about it, so they're happy to talk about to other people. Other people are curious, like, oh, I've got a similar problem, let me then kind of reach out and see if you can solve my problem. and
Yeah.
and so that the whole kind of flywheel kind of approach of solving problems, not fixing features, really
Yeah.
really becomes a powerful model.
Yeah. That's great. I know we've got the clock running here. We're getting close to the end. I wanted to sort of touch on one last thing because you're talking about business case, and one of the things that for me, running transformation, buying from lots of vendors, and managing budgets, is one of the things that's really important is risk management. So how do you bring risk management into that business case, and particularly it's usually the how's the client going to test the product, right? Do you do a free trial? Do you do a pilot? Do you do I love the concept you use of proof of value.
Yep.
How do you approach that, and how do you decide? Do you have a set formula? How flexible do you keep it?
I mean, I've done all of them in my career. I've done free trials, I've done pilots, I've done proof of values, and I think a lot of it does depend on kind of the maturity of the product. If you're kind of still early days with your product, and there are some opportunities for enhancement,
Mm,
you're really risky going with a free trial.
mm,
Ultimately, I also don't really value free trials on an enterprise sales motion, because the enterprise problem is quite complex. And so that's where a proof of value or a paid pilot really kind of work in. And so for me, proof of value is kind of a lightning quick 1-2 week. We set a Monday, Wednesday, Friday agenda. We're going to do this, 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 and this, totally free. And that potentially could get you to a proof of concept phase. Proof of concept, again, is we're validating a business problem, whether it's a technical integration with another solution, whether it's basically making sure that the AI works,
mhm.
whatever kind of the lingering doubts that are preventing them from signing
Right.
the dotted line. you know, Typically also, I always try to get something out of it, grand, 5 grand, whatever. But basically, it goes through procurement, right? And for me, that basically shows that they're serious. They're not just
Right.
kind of kicking tires. The procurement process for $1,000 and or 300 grand is still hairy, you know.
But you
Um,
get through that as well, right? Because there might be something that's going to throw you, and you know you're never going to get that contract. So I
that's
think
exactly it.
that's part of clearing that for you as well. So you're
That's
looking for
exactly it.
commitment, right? You're looking for it's almost like is you you might be doing for next to nothing, but it's not
Yep.
a like here's the tool, go and play with it. But you have that engagement, the commitment, and you can sort of get the feedback and also I think learn why they might not choose to go ahead with you.
Well, it's an opportunity for additional discovery. And this is a great opportunity for product to kind of sit there and lurk,
Yeah,
or even be an active participant in that POC or POV,
yeah,
where they're mashing a button and it's like it's not working. I'm super frustrated. You come in,
yeah,
it's like, oh well, yeah, that button doesn't do it what you thought it was supposed to do. Let
yeah.
me feature flag
Let
that,
me
or
take that back.
whatever.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
um, which again, with larger clients, they love it, and it shows a partnership commitment that you're willing to kind of work with them.
yeah,
I mean, I do think free trials for kind of SMB products, where you are doing that product led growth, credit card transactional stuff. Yeah, I mean, you need to let them test the product,
yeah,
try before you buy. But typically, it's also not a super sophisticated product, right?
yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, they're going to get lost, and you can put as many walk me tutorials through as you want, but I close those as fast as I can. They're just annoyance. Like, I'm a
yeah,
smart guy, I think, and if I can't figure your
yeah,
product out in 10 minutes, I'm out of here.
yeah. Well, that's the reality, right? There's a reality that we
Yeah,
have to live with, and yeah, if you're solving a complex problem, you just can't simplify that enough in a
that's it.
UX that is kind of super intuitive. Yeah. Well, Josh, we're out of time.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, we could go on forever, but
I think we
thank you
should.
again very much for sharing. I think there's some really gold nuggets there, and yeah, looking forward to catching up next time.
Absolutely. Bob, fantastic meeting you, and doing this live, and looking forward to our next one.
And looking forward to working more with Bongo as well.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.